Hollywood always knew how to make a woman shine, only to quietly cast her into the shadows. But there was one woman who refused to follow that path. She was rejected, labeled as box office poison, mocked for daring to wear trousers instead of silk gowns. And then she stopped waiting to be rescued. She stepped onto the stage with a contract in hand, a play of her own choosing, and a whole new set of rules. This is the story of Katharine Hepburn, the woman who didn't wait for approval. She rewrote Hollywood's rules by living them. When Katharine Hepburn first arrived in Hollywood in 1932, she wasn't like anyone who had come before. It wasn't her radiant beauty, nor a sultry gaze like many of her peers. It was that she never tried to fit into any mold. Raised in New England, where girls were taught to stand straight, speak clearly, and think independently. Katharine came from a family of pioneers, her mother a suffragist, her father a doctor promoting sexual education. As a child, she rode horses, swam and played golf better than the boys. And when she entered Hollywood, it wasn't to be admired. It was to think, to act, and to work as an equal. Her start was meteoric. Her debut in A Bill of Divorcement made waves. Morning Glory earned her an Oscar within a few short years. Stardom arrived early, and so did the consequences. Katharine didn't like publicity. She refused staged galas and press interviews. When the studio arranged glittering events for public favor, she declined with honesty. "I didn't come here to dance off stage. I came to make art." What made her different became what Hollywood disliked. She chose roles of women with backbone, not submissive, not weak, not awaiting rescue. From Sylvia Scarlett to Mary of Scotland, her characters thought decided and rejected unworthy men. But the audiences weren't ready, nor were the studio bosses. Revenue dipped. Critics scoffed. Then came the infamous headline, "Box Office Poison." Her name was listed first, not for lacking talent, but for being too original, too uncontrollable, too threatening to a system that prized sameness. She knew. She left. Quietly. Without drama or declaration. Leaving behind only one question. Must a woman become someone else to survive in Hollywood? Katharine refused to be someone else. She wasn't quitting, only withdrawing. For a woman wise enough to lose gracefully is also wise enough to return and to change the game on her own terms. Hollywood didn't slam the door. It simply stopped calling. No more invitations. No scripts. No phone calls. Katharine Hepburn, once Hollywood's brightest star, had become a name spoken with caution, as though being true to herself had been a crime. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply stepped away and quietly began a new game. She returned to Broadway where everything had once begun. No cameras, no contracts, just a role with soul and an audience willing to listen. There, she reclaimed the one thing Hollywood had stolen during her years of compromised freedom. Then she read The Philadelphia Story, and she didn't see a role. She saw herself. Tracy Lord, wealthy, proud, brilliant, but also lonely, wounded, and sometimes too proud to be touched. No one offered her the part. No studio came calling. But she didn't wait. She bought the rights herself, stage and screen. She managed the production. She picked the director. She cast Cary Grant and James Stewart to ensure attention. No woman had ever done it. No one had dared to rebuild their career on the ashes of a ruined reputation, stronger, taller, and designed entirely by their own vision. She didn't defend her past. She created her present. The play opened to sold-out shows. Critics redefined her name. And when the film released, starring her in the lead, with the sharpness and wit she had seen in the script, Hollywood had no choice but to turn back. The Philadelphia Story was more than a success. It was a statement: I never needed your permission. I only needed the space to do it my way. This wasn't a return. It was a revolution. and Katharine Hepburn, the once box office poison, had rewritten the rules of her own life. The Philadelphia Story wasn't just a hit, it was a masterstroke of quiet defiance. She didn't criticize, didn't lash out, didn't repeat box office poison. She simply stood, eyes sharp, stride steady, and the world saw I was never gone. You were just looking the wrong way. Hollywood didn't apologize. It rarely does. But its silence was admission. They couldn't deny the revenue, the acclaim, the fact that the woman they once erased had restored the dignity of a faltering industry. She hadn't changed to return. She returned to change Hollywood. That was the difference. And it was why she began to be respected, not as a star, but as a force. She didn't need handlers, didn't need protection, didn't need to please anyone but herself. After the Philadelphia Story, she didn't relent. She chose difficult roles, unpredictable women, stories that lingered after the credits. And when she paired with Spencer Tracy, a reserved, sharp-witted man, they became an on-screen duo no one could replicate. Hollywood, once her gatekeeper, now courted her. She picked scripts, directors, co-stars. Her power didn't come from public favor, it came from uncompromising talent. She didn't mold to the frame. She made the frame widen for her. And when that happened, women everywhere, on and off screen, saw something new, that a woman didn't need to be soft, to be heard, or submissive to be kept, or obedient to do what she believed was right. In a world where the rules were written by men, Katharine Hepburn walked in not to change them, but to rewrite the whole game. And she didn't need anyone to hold the lead for her. She had proven that given the chance, she'd direct her own life with a script only she could write. If Hollywood had ever hoped to make Katharine its idealized woman, Spencer Tracy proved she could be a woman on her own terms, not tender on paper, but real in every breath. Their relationship didn't start with fireworks or vows. They met filming Woman of the Year, two opposing worlds' values rhythms. Spencer, a devout Catholic complex, still married but apart. Katharine, disbelieving in marriage, unbound, and never needing someone to feel whole. Yet they found each other, not to change one another, but to share a silence they both missed. With Spencer, Katharine didn't need to win, or fight, or be tough. She only needed to be there. No demands, no judgments, no expectations. And he, worn by faith, fame, and anxiety, found his last sanctuary not in church, but in her. They didn't live together, didn't hold hands in public, but for 27 years, she was the first he called, when in pain the one who sat with him through dimming afternoons, the one who asked for no title, but gave all her loyalty. Hollywood didn't understand a love that didn't perform, but Katharine didn't need it to. Love wasn't to be explained. It only needed to be lived in patience and waiting, in the look she gave when he stepped on stage and the breath she held when he grew ill. No one imagined that Hollywood's strongest woman, the one who wore slacks among gowns, who bought film rights for herself, would love with such quiet depth. But that was Katharine. Not a symbol, because she always led, but because she knew when to step back. Not out of weakness, but because strength is knowing what you need, not what others want to see. Hollywood didn't script that love, and it couldn't erase it, because it wasn't a scene. It was a life lived with the gentlest strength behind the curtain of the grandest stage. In Hollywood, age is a swift hourglass, especially for women. When skin loses, glow eyes dim from youth, they speak of supporting roles, mothers, dear old ladies. Leading parts fade past 40. But Katharine Hepburn didn't play by that rule. Entering midlife, no one spoke of her expiration date. She didn't allow it. She didn't cling to youth with thicker makeup. She didn't tighten her face to play ingenues. She let time move through her hair, thinning, eyes wrinkling, and turned age into art. Her roles deepened, no longer about prideful women seeking identity, but about women who had lived forgiven and dared to love again after loss. In The African Queen, she played a stern missionary whose heart awakens in the wild. In Long Day's Journey into Night, she exposed a mind unraveling a woman once strong, now slipping into shadows. And in On Golden Pond, she became a living memory, an emblem of acceptance and beauty time alone can grow. Hollywood couldn't write her off. She was never waiting at the door. She stood center stage, ready. No one asked her age, because it no longer mattered when she spoke, when she looked into her co-star's eyes, when she stepped into the frame without needing time's permission. Katharine didn't just age on screen. She let the world witness it. No hiding, no filters. She taught viewers, especially women, that every wrinkle had a voice. That experience didn't belong in soft focus, but in the heart of the frame. And that beauty didn't lie in eternal youth, but in standing firm without needing approval. At 60, still leading, still winning, still silencing theaters with presence, she reshaped cinema's mirror, so that women at any age could see themselves clearly without bowing their heads. Hollywood measures success by how often someone stands on stage holding a golden statue. But Katharine Hepburn, across a career that spanned over 6 decades, showed the world that not everyone who wins needs to be there to collect, and not everyone who receives applause must stand in its spotlight. She won 4 Academy Awards for Best Actress, more than anyone in history. Yet she never attended a single ceremony to accept them. No gowns, no tearful speeches, no reserved seating. She was absent not out of disdain for recognition, but because she never let outside validation define her worth. The first time she won in 1934 for Morning Glory, her agent called to share the news. She smiled and said, "Good. But I know I can do better." Not arrogance, just vision. She always looked toward the next role, never stopping long enough to bask in past glory. Awards weren't destinations. They were rest stops. And she never lingered long enough to take a bow. Later wins came for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, The Lion in Winter, and On Golden Pond. Each time applause filled the room, but her seat stayed empty. She might have been reading scripts, caring for Spencer Tracy in his final days, or simply walking alone along the Connecticut shoreline, where she felt more herself than any stage could offer. People asked, "Why didn't you come? Weren't you happy?" She'd answer gently, "Of course I was. But I don't need a statue to know that." In a world that taught women to be grateful for every scrap of success, Katharine Hepburn represented a different pride, quiet, unprovable, unapologetic. She didn't reject awards. She just didn't build her life around them. To her, the real prize was doing what she believed was right and living it fully in the roles she chose with her heart. And as with everything in her life, she didn't need a spotlight to be remembered. She only needed to exist on screen in the fierce eyes of the women she portrayed, and in the memory of millions of viewers who couldn't always recall what year she won, but remembered exactly how they felt, watching her walk through a frame, steady, free, and like no one else. For most actors, retirement is a quiet afternoon when applause fades and the mirror no longer reflects the glamour. But for Katharine Hepburn, it wasn't a sorrowful moment. She didn't perform until her last breath out of fear of being forgotten. She chose to leave the stage as she had entered it, deliberate, lucid, and without needing a guide. As age crept in, her hands began to tremble. Her voice slowed. Her steps faltered. But she never hid any of it. She let time share the screen with her, unmasked, unsoftened. In Love Affair, her final film role, she appeared not as a star, but as a woman who had lived love lost, and now sat by a window, smiling gently at memory. She needed few lines, just a glance, a tilt of the head, a presence that held decades. No cameras, no contracts, no 12-hour days. She returned to her seaside home in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, planting reading, answering the occasional call from old friends. No fanfare, no stage, no need to preserve the spotlight just because it had once followed her. She once said, "When I stop acting, I won't play Katharine Hepburn." And she kept her word. No pretense, no events, no attempts to remain in light that no longer felt like her own. People still sought her out, journalists, filmmakers, admirers, with one last question. "Do you regret anything?" And as always, she'd smile, faintly shake her head and say, "I lived my way. That's all I ever needed to hold on to." In her final years, there was no tragic illness, no cold machines. She was still herself, hands trembling but still holding books, eyes dimming but still recognizing loved ones, a soul unlost, despite a changing world. When she passed in 2003, the world didn't just lose an actress. It lost a living symbol not of beauty or fame, but of dignity. Katharine didn't just live a successful life. She lived a life of integrity, and no one, not even time, could take that from her. When Katharine Hepburn left this world, she didn't leave behind a thick memoir, no self-directed documentaries, no final interviews revealing backstage secrets. And she didn't need to. Her life, every frame, every role, every choice, was the living memoir she gave to the world. She didn't just change how people saw actresses. She changed how society measured women. She didn't ask to wear pants when skirts were required. She didn't ask to be single, childless, loving, but unmarried alone, but not lacking. In a world where women were told to be agreeable, moderate, lovable, Katharine Hepburn said, "No, I will be myself." And by doing so, she opened a door for countless other women, the ones who never dared argue with their mothers, never said no to their bosses, never left bad love for fear of loneliness. She didn't campaign. She didn't preach. She simply lived. And that quiet, persistent, proud existence spoke for generations. After her actresses dared to demand better roles, dared to produce their own films, dared to leave Hollywood when their hearts no longer belonged there. Female writers dared to tell the truth, to show hurt without apology. Mothers dared to teach their daughters that a woman's worth isn't measured in waistlines, wedding rings, or years spent pleasing someone else, but in the courage to step through fear and live truthfully. Katharine never called herself a pioneer, but by refusing to bow her head, she cracked the walls, and the first light entered through the firmness of her silence. She didn't need to be an example. She didn't need to lecture. She just had to be fully in her own choice. And that echo remains soft, but unbroken in the hearts of every woman who ever saw herself in those clear, unwavering eyes. In every performance, she carried a piece of herself, and in every woman who followed, there remains a little Katharine that never faded. It wasn't just the awards or iconic roles that etched Katharine Hepburn into the world's memory. Often, it was the little things, those private habits, and seemingly trivial choices that spoke most honestly of who she was. And with Katharine, those things were beautifully ordinary. She liked driving herself to film sets, even as a top-billed star. She washed her own clothes, brewed her own tea, and sat alone on a wooden chair facing Long Island Sound. She loved the color of the sea and the stillness of untouched gardens. On certain days, people saw her barefoot on the sand, in an old shirt, her hair pinned up, no makeup, like a nameless woman in a world she had once conquered. She loved growing tomatoes, writing letters to friends in slanted, hard-to-read handwriting, reading at midnight, biking through autumn woods alone. No photos, no sharing, No need to leave behind anything but tire tracks on damp ground. Katharine didn't live glamorously. She lived truthfully. What she loved, she held dear, like the half-knitted scarf from 1987 still in her drawer. The old photo of Spencer Tracy in a silver frame. Her father's worn watch, the man she always spoke of with reverence. Once a reporter asked, "What's the most valuable thing in life?" She didn't think long. She smiled and replied, "Peace, and being able to cook your own breakfast." A light answer, but one that carried the full spirit of a woman who never let fame erase the beauty of simple things. She once said, "If you always need the world to tell you who you are, you'll never really live." And she lived as someone who didn't wait for confirmation from anyone except the quiet rhythm of her own heart. Katharine Hepburn didn't just leave behind roles. She left behind tender fragments of a life well lived like hand stitches in an old shirt, sunlight lingering on a wooden porch. Quiet, but unforgettable. When Katharine Hepburn passed on a summer morning in 2003, there was no farewell letter, no grand funeral, no parting words to be quoted forever. She simply disappeared, as though her life never needed a dramatic ending to be remembered. Her loved ones sat by her side, holding her hand, until her final breath left the old wooden house in Old Saybrook. Outside, waves still touched the rocky shore. In the small kitchen, the kettle remained warm. The tomato plants by the porch glowed red. Life continued without her, but not without her presence. People ask, who was Katharine Hepburn, a star, a legend, a rebel? The answer doesn't lie in any label. She wasn't born to be called those things. She was born to be fully herself, something many spend a lifetime trying to learn. She never lived to please others, not her parents, not her audience, not men, not Hollywood. And paradoxically, that made her beloved. Because she was real, because she didn't hide, because she said no when others only knew how to smile and endure. Katharine didn't leave behind a new generation, but she planted in all who followed a clear truth: women don't have to be just enough to be kept. They can be strong, stubborn, eccentric, loud, passionate, and still worthy of living fully as themselves. People still watch her films, read her biographies, quote her words with respect and awe. But her deepest legacy isn't on screen. It's in the bravery of living truly every day in a world that keeps asking women to be silent, soft, and predictable. Not everyone can be Katharine Hepburn, but anyone can learn one thing from her: stand tall. Say what you believe. Live your life in the way only you understand. And if one day you see yourself in the mirror with wrinkles, silver hair, and eyes no longer sparkling with youth's smile, because, as Katharine once said, grace isn't in age. It's in how you walk alongside yourself